Stephanie, this is a pretty cool location in Gettysburg.
Yeah, we are on day 2 of our Gettysburg exploration, and we're currently in the National Cemetery here.
And this is very close to the actual spot. They built a monument here that Lincoln gave his famous address. And it's just a beautiful, the monuments here, the cemetery, it's just the most beautiful hallowed ground I've ever seen.
It feels very spiritual, very holy here. And this is, 300 feet from where he delivered the proclamation. Can I say that?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to recite it for us?
I was going to call it the Gettysburg Address, but we can do that too.
Do you want to recite it by heart?
Yeah. Yeah, 7 years ago. That's about the most I know.
There you go. That was a good start.
Yeah, right?
So yes, this is a really cool place, and just 300 feet from here was where he actually stood when he delivered it. It does show it on some maps, and we spoke with a national park guide, and she directed us over, so we're going to see if we can find the spot.
Very cool.
So after the battle at Gettysburg, nearly 7,500 soldiers were hastily buried in shallow graves on the battlefield. Hundreds more died at hospitals each day. The National Cemetery was dedicated in 1863, and President Abraham Lincoln came and gave his most famous and inspirational speech, the Gettysburg Address. Abraham Lincoln. So this flagpole signifies where Abe Lincoln actually stood for his speech. This is called a rostrum podium. It was built in 1879, and they have had 5 American presidents actually come and speak here. This is Elizabeth Masser's Thorne, and her statue stands in the evergreen Gettysburg Cemetery here. And with the help of her elderly father, amidst the heat and the stench, Elizabeth buried 91 soldiers in the weeks following the Battle of Gettysburg. She was 6 months pregnant at the time, and she dug the graves in one of the rockiest regions of the cemetery. Pretty amazing woman. They have these rows of names of soldiers all throughout here. The statue says Gettysburg, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1863. Some states have these markers identifying 6 bodies that they did not have names for. It's kind of sad. This says, Kentucky honors her son, Abraham Lincoln, who delivered his immortal address to the site now marked by the Soldiers' Monument. Here's his address in bronze and his signature. This section of the cemetery is just numbered gravestones, and they go all the way up to 997, and there were 997 unidentified soldiers, and they were buried here.
So every state represented in the Civil War has their own monument. And on that monument, the state that made the monument basically engraved what they wanted in it, the soldiers' names, expressions about certain members of the brigade and so forth.
And they actually placed them, we were told by our tour guide yesterday, where the battle had their biggest advance or their biggest...
where they made the biggest impact.
Yeah, on the war. Yep.
So if we pan up on this one, and you'll see right here, right there, that's George Custer, the famous George Custer.
You can see this monument out here. We're in the middle of a cornfield.
Now this is kind of an interesting thing about George Custer, because I never really tied him together with the Civil War, because you know, all we really kind of knew about was the Battle of Little Bighorn,
which we visited last summer, and unfortunately...
And we have a video of that.
Well, it's a short. Unfortunately, we weren't YouTubing yet when we first started traveling, but we did go visit the Battle of Little Bighorn.
Bighorn
in Montana, and it was pretty amazing. Just a neat place. And so here we are. And Custer's back in our life again.
So this is the thing about Custer, really an interesting character of the time. He graduated last in his class of West Point in 1861. And, you know, I had a friend that went to West Point, and it was the hardest place to get into. You needed a letter from a senator, and you need to be really smart and all that type of stuff. But anyway, I don't think being last is that bad. But anyway, so Custer finishes last in his class in 1861, and the Civil War is ramping up. So he's put under the command of a fellow lieutenant colonel, and as a commissioned officer, he learned, being right under the direct tutelage of this general, and I have to check his name because I don't remember his name. But anyway, although he finished last in his class, he proved himself to be a really good leader, and his men liked him. And he was somewhat flamboyant for the time, because he kind of altered his uniform and you know, so that he could be seen, and you know, he was kind of like a movie star in those days. But something I never really tied in again was that he was part of almost all the major battles of the Civil War, and he was a fearless leader. He would charge and lead his troops, and he'd say, you know, let's go Wolverines. Yeah, the troops loved him, and he would lead these charges. And in fact, he directed a charge close by here where he was outnumbered roughly 2 or 3 to 1, and they won that small battle.
They persevered, yeah.
Yeah. So he survived all the battles, and it's interesting because officers were typically on horseback, and they're right for the pickings. You know, if you're a sniper back in the day. Yeah. And it's interesting because there was those that would say you don't shoot the officers out of respect, even though they were on the other side. But that kind of changed a bit during the war, where they started taking out the officers because the strategic experts on battle. So they kind of wanted to take those guys out. So anyway, Custer was in harm's way many times during the whole Civil War campaign, and he persevered, and he went on and survived. And then,
how many years later to fight Little Bighorn?
Well, it's funny because the country was, you know, you have the North and the South in the Civil War. Everything west of basically the Mississippi River is the Wild West still.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like 1881 when the Battle of the OK Corral happened, and some of those other things that we've gone and seen. It's roughly the same time period, maybe 15 years later.
Right.
I think it was 1891 was OK Corral. But anyway, Custer is sent out there, and the Indian Wars were going on, and he was in charge of driving the Indians back, and they were trying to put an end to the native Indians and get them on reservations and take the West.
Right.
And unfortunately, Custer, who was, and think about it, this is a guy that's escaped death so many times.
Right.
Why not just charge at the Battle of Bighorn?
Yep.
Because you at this point really are fearless.
Yeah.
And immortal to your men. And he met his untimely death, but he was a very brave man. Made a bad calculation at the time at Little Bighorn, but he was a brave man, and it's really nice to come and visit Gettysburg and see such a historical figure in American history as well as military history.
Yeah.
It's something else.
This was a pretty cool find for us to see that he was involved with the Civil War.
And it's funny because we were just looking at doing our research on Gettysburg, and we were just sitting there in bed looking at our phones about Gettysburg, and we're like, whoa, was Custer here?
Yeah.
And then we started reading, and like, of course he was here.
Yeah,
of course
right?
Custer was here, right?
Yeah, this is pretty neat.
Yeah, but Custer was the youngest general ever commissioned in the U.S. Army.
Wow.
Pretty amazing, yeah.
So Custer led the Michigan Cavalry Brigade, the 2nd Brigade, 3rd Division Cavalry Corps. And this is General George Custer leading the charge of the 1st Michigan. This is the map we picked up at the visitor center. It was $1.50, but it shows you all the cool places you should see when you visit Gettysburg. It's worth the purchase for sure. This is our Gettysburg map that we're working with, and there are so many sights to see. You can see how huge this map is. I just have it folded out in the front of the car with me, and we're trying to find all these cool places. This house is the Trossel House, and it's a farmhouse that was in the Battle of Gettysburg, and it is owned by the Park Service, and it has been kept pretty much accurate as to history. And they are also part of this barn over here, and we're going to show you this barn because it's very unique. Where are we at now, Jeff?
Well, this is one of the great finds on the Gettysburg battlefield, and
yes.
If you look back here, let's see if I can do it with my finger. Right.
Up forward. There you go. See that hole?
Yeah, right there. That hole I just put my finger on.
Yes.
That's a cannonball hole.
Yeah, cannonball. We're right into the side of this barn.
And now that was an exploding cannonball, and it went in there, and it didn't blow up. And they actually have the cannonball in the museum, so maybe we'll see that later.
Wow.
Interesting thing about cannonballs in the Civil War, they had a fuse on them, okay? And they could time the fuse depending on how far it was, so they could do like an 8-second fuse, a 6-second fuse, 4-second fuse, and they cut it to length. And when they fired the cannonball out of the cannon, it would ignite the fuse and send the cannonball out, but half the time...
Sorry, bugs.
Half the time the cannonballs went where they're supposed to go, but they did not explode. And this is an example of one that went in to the barn right there, and it did not explode.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
I don't know if I really want to pick up that cannonball and say,
right?
hey, look what I found, you know? Yeah.
This is Pennsylvania's monument. It's massive, and it's dedicated to the generals, And they also have a statue of Lincoln right here on the left.
Have a look at that, Stephanie.
Gorgeous.
So every state that was involved in the Civil War has some sort of monument. And you know, we've been here, there's monuments everywhere. After a while, there's so many monuments, you don't know which one to stop and look
Yeah,
at.
your head is spinning.
Right,
with
but this is clearly the biggest of them all. And this is Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we're in Pennsylvania.
So
and this is their monument, and it has the goddess Nike on top.
Very cool. And we can go to the top of this one, so we're gonna climb the stairway and go up and have a look from the top viewpoint up there.
Let's do it.
Yeah, man.
There is Little Round Top and Big Round Top. Important strategic places in Gettysburg. They have a little reenactment going here where they have people in period costume, and they have like their army tents that they would have slept in. Here's one set up with their cot and their military uniforms hanging here. This is the regiment's chaplain and his setup where they would hold services. Here is the band for the regiment. Here is a cook tent. They have a stove set up out here and their kitchen. This home and farmhouse is the Hummelball home, and it's a Civil War era home. This is very neat. Here's the well, outhouse, and barn. So it's hard to imagine that this was such a horrible, bloody battle here because there's so much beauty here today.
Yeah, yeah. And just the remembrances of those that died here is really impressive. And you know, this is our first battlefields, and I know this is the big one.
Yeah.
But we're going to see a couple other Civil War battlefields next week, actually.
Yeah.
Down in Virginia, when we travel down to Virginia. But just a solemn, beautiful, spiritual place here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It is. It warms my heart to see so many people here remembering these soldiers and patriots that gave their lives for our country, and you know, we're thankful every day for all the freedoms we have.
For sure. And you know, it's amazing because if you actually had the time to stop and read all the monuments and read all the names and understand what you were seeing, I mean, they just completely covered this whole grounds with monuments and statues and plaques and reader boards and cannon and on and
all
on and on.
been
It's
preserved.
just amazing.
Yeah, it's been
amazing.
preserved to a T too, as far as every tree and fence. We were told by a guide that, you know, over time trees have been planted, additions have been made on houses, and all of those had to be removed.
Yeah.
Per history, per the maps and everything they had, the National Park Service has restored it to original state. And so that makes it even more cool.
It's kind of interesting because they told us back in the day, photography was pretty new, and it would take about 10 seconds to expose a picture. So there's not any actual fighting scenes per se, but it was kind of interesting. He actually told us they would sometimes take a body and pose it.
Yeah.
And take a picture of it like it was an action shot.
Yeah, they'd pick it up somewhere and put
a
down
rifle in his
somewhere
hands
else.
and just take a shot of it.
To have the Civil War action shot. So if you ever
Yeah.
see one of those might not be
Yeah.
historically accurate.
No, yeah.
But thanks for joining us on this tour of Gettysburg. We
Yeah,
hope
we've had
you
a
guys
great time.
enjoyed it.
Yeah.
We are going to do a tour of the actual town of Gettysburg and landmarks there, because the downtown area is just gorgeous. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, and thanks for coming along with us. And
Yeah.
like we were saying before, this has been a real bucket list thing for us, and we've had a great time just exploring this battlefield. Just fantastic. So thanks to our subscribers for following along with us, and
Yeah.
we'll see you down the road.
Yes, Jeff and Steph.
Steph's excellent adventure.
Gettysburg Adventure.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.